And they're known as psychedelic rock, blues rock, acid rock. But really, one word sums them up, and that is counterculture, which is obviously two words put together. Um,
Hey, everybody out there. Welcome back to another episode of the Audiophiles. You got Andy, we got John, and we got some music on deck, my man. John, what are you going to be offering up for me to go off and peep out, man?
okay, so I'm taking a punt here. There's a little known band called The Doors.
Hmm.
But this is a track which isn't one of their most famous ones, so I'm hoping you've not listened to this before. It's called Peace Frog.
This is where we get into that weird gray area where if it's not one of my favorites that I have sat down and listened to, or one of the big hits, names aren't really going to do much in the way of helping me identify if I'm familiar. Hitting play will, though, which I'm happy to do. Even if it does, I do like have an epiphany where I've heard this before. It's The Doors. I'll be okay. So let me come back and tell you with certainty on whether or not I have heard it, and regardless of that, my thoughts. And because I'm sure even if it's one that I've heard in passing, it's not one that I've sat down and really dissected or whatever. So there'll be only one way to figure out all of this, as well as just my overall thoughts on your selection here, John. So let me scurry off, give Peace Frog a spin, and then I will hop back and let you know what I've made of it. Oh, it's funktastic right out of the gate. Krieger's guitar kind of starts that. Then in comes Densmore, is it? On the drums, just playing along perfectly, keeping the, funk motif aloft. And then that bass work comes in, and oh my God, that got some fat stank on it. And I really, really love this sound. Let's take it back. It's all very Doors. Hello,
Dead blood in the streets, it's up to my ankles. Feet blood in the streets, it's up to my knees.
I think I've passively heard this song before. I didn't sit down and give it the attention that it deserves, but this sounds. I don't know if it's because it sounds so Doors, or that has this like air of familiarity to it, or if it's something that I've heard before. I'm leaning toward it's something that I've heard before, given how much Doors I've, passively and in a focused manner listened to in the past. So, what do you say, Jim?
Dead blood in the streets, it's up to my ankles. Feet blood in the streets, it's up to my knees. Feet blood in the street, the town of Chicago. Feet blood on the rise, it's following me. Get about to break, yeah. She came in and she drove away. Sunlight in her hair. She blood in the streets on the river of San Ghosts crowd the young child's fragile eggshell mind. Blood.
It wouldn't be a Doors song without a little bit of that spoken word Morrison poetry finding its way in there. That's what most of it is, but that really right there, that was a shining example of Morrison's, writing. Let's pull that back a little bit.
Indians scattered on dawn's highway bleeding. Ghosts crowd the young child's fragile eggshell mind. Blood in the streets in the town of New Haven. Blood stains the roofs and the palm trees of Venice. Blood in my love in the terrible summer. Bloody red sun of fantastic LA. Blood screens the brain and chop off the fingers. Blood will be born in the birth of a nation.
Yeah.
Blood is the rose of mysterious union. Dead blood in the streets, it's up to my ankles. Blood in the streets, it's up to my knee. Blood in the streets, the town of Chicago. Blood on the rise is following me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, 3 minutes. Nice little bass noodling there at the end. What an interesting song. I mean, it was very Doors-like, but from a lyrical standpoint, very interesting stuff. It sounds like this kind of mostly metaphorical, or kind of like an allegory for this young country and its growing pains, and how blood in the street is part of those growing pains, continues to be part of our growing pains here. A lot of the lines were really interesting. I mean, this one where he says, blood being the rose of a mysterious union, definitely makes me think of this social experiment we call the United States of America. As did the part where he says, ghosts crowd the young child's fragile eggshell mind. If the child, and comparatively speaking, we are as a nation, if the child is the country, then yeah, there are ghosts in our past that, crowd, the thought of which, I guess, or the thought of them kind of crowds our our eggshell or fragile minds. It doesn't take much to distract, divide, pull us apart. But on the other side of that coin, it also doesn't take too much to get us to get behind something either. At least that's been my experience. But yeah, we are easily distracted, easily divided, but ultimately can be brought together. But it's never clean. It's always messy. So that's kind of what I take away from this, or what I'm gleaning from it. I could be totally off. But I do love the funky, upbeat nature. When Morrison started to growl that last stanza or two, it really leaned into this kind of blues delivery. I loved it all. The video footage was a lot of fun to watch too. It's always kind of good to get a glimpse through the looking glass and into the Wayback Machine, for what that era was like in rock and roll. And so yeah, and always an interesting band too to focus on from that time period. I don't know if there's anybody who's more important to a band's auditory identity, what they sound like, than Ray Manzarek. I mean, he's kind of their ace up the sleeve. You hear a little bit of that, and you're listening to the Doors. I don't think there's not many other bands that have that individual. I'm sure there are plenty. I know that, but for the most part, there aren't. And he is definitely, what gives them their unique sound. And I've always appreciated that about them and him. I think over time he's become less of an unsung hero. But it's hard to be the sung hero when you're standing in the shadow of a character like the Lizard King that was Jim Morrison. But I don't really think you can undersell how important Ray Manzarek's organ work is to the overall sound of the Doors. That's just a simple observation I'm making in the wake of having listened to it. But yeah, let's get back and chop this one up some more with John and see what he has to say on the matter.
The Lord Cockfield, he's back. So, you had listened to Peace Frog by the Doors. Ring any bells?
Yeah, actually, it did. But like I suggested, it's one that I've passively listened to. I didn't sit down and give it the the true experience that it deserves of my undivided attention. So I was glad to revisit this. And to be fair, I can't be like, oh yes, the last time I heard it was, and I was doing the no. I just know I've generally heard this somewhere. Probably when the album was playing, I got up to hit the lid or something like that. But yeah, I know I've heard this before. It begins with the funky stylings of Krieger's guitar, Densmore's drums, and some fat, stanky bass noodling. Who I don't know. I'm assuming maybe Ray played that part. Pardon me, or it was a session musician may have. Okay, yeah, gotcha. Nonetheless, it sounds fabulous. And of course, the calling card of the band's sound, those injections of Ray Manzarek's organ work then make an appearance. Already, I have this haunting suspicion that I've heard this before passively, and I've just never sat down to really focus on it or its lyrical content. So even if I have heard it before, I certainly have never paid the attention that it probably warrants and that I have done here. Morrison then joins the band as he sings, "There's blood in the streets, it's up to my ankle. She came, blood in the streets, it's up to my knee. She came, blood in the streets, the town of Chicago. She came, blood on the rise, it's following me, just about the break of day." So it sounds like civil unrest is the topic du jour in this number. And from here, the song shifts musically as it opens up a bit briefly, and this portion is accented by some bubbly and bouncy guitar noodling, during which Morrison offers up, "She came and then she drove away, sunlight in her hair." An interesting observation of beauty in the midst of what otherwise sounds like a very calamitous environment, given the previous stanza. We launch back into that previous portion, and with it comes more blood in the streets. And in this case, it would appear that along with it is formed a river of sadness. And now the blood is up to Morrison's thighs, having risen from his ankles and knees in the previous stanza. And these rivers run red down the legs of the city, with women crying their own red rivers of tears. The song transitions again, and he reiterates that she came into town and then drove away with sunlight in her hair. There is this lovely bit of interplay between the drums and the organ and the guitar, where they kind of bounce back and forth in this sort of back and forth, almost off-kiltery kind of way. And then we are sort of treated to this brief bit of solo work by Krieger thereafter. And the music then retreats, leaving only some light drum work that is accented every couple of beats by notes from the bass and the guitar. And over this tapestry, we are treated to some of Morrison's trademark near spoken word delivery of his poetry, as he offers up, "Indians scattered on dawn's highway bleeding. Ghosts crowd the young child's fragile eggshell mind." I thought this was a really interesting line. So, the ghosts crowd the young child's fragile eggshell mind makes me think if the child is America, because comparatively speaking to all the other nations in the world, we are childlike in just that we're younger. We haven't been around as long. and this the fragile eggshell mind, and these ghosts are like the ghosts of, mistakes that we've made, or blemishes on our resume that haunt us. And our fragile eggshell mind is, this idea that you portray yourself to be the leader of this and the leader of that, or the foremost of this and the foremost of that. But as I just mentioned, you've made mistakes along the way. And I think that with this ego, the fragile eggshell mind could easily be applied to an ego as well. Something fragile that could easily be broken with a little bit of like circumstantial evidence to throw your whole self-assessment on its head. So for me, and then I mean to precede that with Indian Scattered, which is perhaps one of our, if not our first, you know, flying in the face of freedom and democracy, that we then would go on to profess we are the purveyors of, or the inventors of, which is ludicrous. That's what comes to mind just in those two lines. And before that, we're talking about an era where civil rights is, being pushed forth, and you're talking about blood in the streets and all this stuff, and there was literal blood in the streets during those times, and even periods before that. But for similar reasons, or reasons that would then lead to the civil rights movement. And with our Supreme Court, trying to fucking create Jim Crow 2.0, we really haven't come that far from it. So here we are, and that's where my fragile eggshell mind is led when I hear those lyrics. So this is followed by a lone rap of the drums, a slight pause, and then we are back into the thick of it, led by Manzarek's manic organ notation that is his calling card. And lo and behold, we encounter more blood on the streets, this time in the town of New Haven, and then the blood-stained roofs and palm trees of Venice. And I assume he means beach, the area of Los Angeles. There is also an allusion to this terrible summer and the blood-red sun of LA. From here, the Lizard King ramps up his voice, which only further leans into this sort of bluesy roots, from which the song has sprung. And he then fervently paints a very violent visage of blood-stained screams in her brain as they chop off her fingers. A metaphor, I'm hoping. He then goes on to sing of blood being born in the birth of a nation. This is becoming clearer and clearer that my assumptions earlier, I think, are becoming validated. And blood being this rose of a mysterious union. I fucking love that line. Blood being the rose of a mysterious union. This is a mysterious union, the United States. I mean, imagine if you took 2 continents worth of people from all different walks of life and cultures, and tried to put them all under the same banner and get them to all agree on the same thing at the same time. It's a feat of impossibility. Which then reminds me of the quote that is, I think, falsely attributed to Churchill, where he says, and I'm going to paraphrase here as I sift through the proper wording of this, but you can always count on America to do all the right things after they've exhausted every other option. And I think that part of that is because of how hard it is to herd the cats that are our populace and our different politics and beliefs. So it takes us a while to get to the right place. And it's often a very messy process to get there. It looks like you have, as the resident American, I'd love to hear. No, please go on, John. What do you have to say?
It's just interesting because what you said there is spot on, but it's kind of the reverse is true now. So in a way, United States of America has been compared to a federal Europe with all these different countries as states, as it were, and the populations, etc. But now you see a point in history where, for the most part, Europe is fairly united in its approach to things, and it's the United States of America that's actually fractured.
Yeah, that united is aspirational, by the way. It is not actual.
Yeah, it's just interesting how we would have 30 years ago, it would have been the reverse,
Yeah.
40 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Yeah.
And even then, 30 or 40 years ago, you'd be lying to yourself. You might have been right about the division of Europe and
Oh,
how
big
that
time.
looked. But you'd be lying to yourself if you thought, oh, 30, 40 years ago, America was more united. I think we're just more under the microscope, or now that the world has shrunk, and you get a more open, voyeuristic view into the sausage making of American politics and our societal dynamics. I just think that the truth has risen to the surface more than it was then. I mean, we were still trying to keep people from voting or counting as a full vote, and
Yeah.
all this stuff was still there. It was just better buried because it wasn't all over a 24-hour news feed or a internet that never sleeps and things like that. But your point is still well made and well taken. I think you're right to an extent. So this idea of the blood being the rose of a mysterious union, I think, is a perfect way to, kind of concentrate all of that down into one succinct line. It's messy. We get wherever we get to, it's messy, and I think that he's talking about the mess that we're in the midst of. They're very evocative lyrics that to me seem to hint at the growing pains of a culture and a society trying to survive without cannibalizing itself, which is a tightrope walk. When you have 330 million plus human beings trying to coexist under the same banner. Morrison then delivers the same first four lines from the opening stanza before the song dismounts on this ringing note, and some bass notes that bring us back to earth. So, musically, this song possesses that quintessential Doors sound that we have all come to expect and enjoy. It was lively and funky and bluesy with lyrical content that evokes images of social strife. And yet there somehow, at least for me, could be gleaned this sense of hope through it all. But it is this hope, it's this idea of American hope, or it's not going to be pretty, whatever it is, but we're going to get there. It's just going to be a fucking slog. Um, so yeah, it's really good stuff. I love that I actually got an opportunity to sit down and listen to these lyrics. I know I've heard this song before, but I never would have latched onto a handful of observations and lyrics that Morrison had made in this one had I not been given this opportunity by you to check it out. Um, and I have to say that, like, Jim, great lyricist, fucking poet who was able to shoehorn his prose into music. But a big reason why he was able to do that, in my opinion, and why the Doors are kind of have that sound where you only need one or two notes of their music before you know who the fuck you're listening to, is Ray. Ray's organ work is the calling card of that sound. It's Flea's bass in the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's, whatever musician stands out in there, he's that guy. And I know he's standing in the shadow of a fucking, legend, who has all this aura and, sexual, kind of chemistry to him. He's this mystery of a man that men wanted to be and women wanted to be with. But just from boil it down to music, Ray is the guy in this band, in my humble opinion, anyway. But please, John, tell me a bit more about this track and your thoughts on the band and it and all that stuff.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andy. I took a punt. I just wanted a chance to get a bit of Doors on the channel.
Yeah,
Because I fucking love them. I really do. So the Doors, famously Los Angeles band, 1965 to 1973, and then some ill-advised iterations thereon. And they're known as psychedelic rock, blues rock, acid rock. But really one word sums them up, and that is counterculture, which is obviously two words put together. So Jim Morrison vocals, Robbie Krieger guitar, Ray Manzarek keyboards, and John Densmore drums. I will say this, maybe not at the start, but Robbie turned into a hell of a blues guitarist as well.
Oh yes,
really,
he
really.
is.
They're all really tight, and he also grew in confidence in terms of his songwriting as well.
Yeah, the only thing that takes away from that is that he happened to play in an era where almost every
Yeah.
band had that guy that was a sick
Yeah.
blues guitarist. You know what I mean? It's the organ that gives them their personality. But you're right. I mean, he is often overlooked when you're just rattling off the killer guitarist from the late mid '60s to early '70s. He is, sadly.
Yeah, definitely. And for this track, I'm not sure about the album, but for this track, Ray Neapolitan, bass guitar, session
Oh.
musician. A nice name, Ray Neapolitan. There you go.
Yeah, but you'll always
Big
be
fan
the
of his ice
second
creams.
Ray. You'll always be the second Ray whenever you contribute to a Doors track.
So, according to the RIAA, they have sold 36 million albums in the United States and over 100 million albums worldwide,
All in a
making
day's
them one of
work.
the best-selling bands of all time. Rolling Stone ranked them 41st on its list of 100 great artists of all time. I will say a lot of those sales, probably was kick-started by Oliver Stone's film. It really did them tremendous amount
Yeah,
in terms
yeah.
of rekindling the interest in their catalogue. Just to be clear, as a fan, I stick my fingers in my ears and go, nah, 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 I can't hear you whenever there's any mention of their output post Jim Morrison's death.
Yeah.
I don't count it as proper. So for me, this track is from their fifth and penultimate album, Morrison Hotel, February 1970. This is a return to the band's blues rock roots following the Soft Parade preceding one, which got a little bit of a kicking from critics, and yeah, it just shows what they know. This is also the beginnings of Fat Jim Morrison, where he grew the beard, put on the weight, and his voice is fucking brilliant in this and the next album. I mean, it's a step, it just has so much more to it. But there you go. So the album is divided into two separate titles, so halves, Hard Rock Cafe and Morrison Hotel. And the cover to this album was taken by Henry Diltz at the Morrison Hotel on South Hope Street in downtown LA. The band were not given permission to photograph. They went in and asked, and they said, no, on your way. So they waited until the clerk had called away from the desk, and they jumped in and hit their seats without even shuffling, and boom, took the shot, all in like split second. The rear cover shows a photograph of the Hard Rock Cafe and the nearby 300 East 5th Street. So in a contemporary review, Cream magazine called the album the most horrifying rock and roll I've ever heard. When they're good, they're simply unbeatable. I know this is the best record I've listened to so far. Present day sort of retro reviews. AllMusic wrote that the Doors employed blues and R&B to some degree on all their albums, but never as consistently, adeptly, or provocatively as they did on Morrison Hotel, with absolutely stunning results. And Slant magazine praised Morrison's vocals as cleaner and clearer than before, and hailed particularly Peace Frog as one of the greatest songs in the Doors catalogue. There's quite a few critics that actually put Morrison Hotel as the best Doors album. And I would say this to them: have you not fucking heard LA Woman? Because it's clearly the best by a fucking long way. But anyway, so the lyrics, and there's some really interesting bits in here. And like you said in terms of the imagery and what it did to your mind, great poetry just springs up all these images, and it's not necessarily a right or a wrong thing.
Yeah.
But there's some interesting notes.
It's the beauty of that kind of writing, right? You can write something that is so literal, it can only mean one thing. And that's great when you're trying to research for like a history project or something like that. But when it comes to art, I love how one sentence can mean myriad different things. And that's where, you get more fruit grows from that vine.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So we'll get into it. There's a few notes on here, so I'll do my best to make flow. There's blood in the streets. It's up to my ankles. She came. There's blood in the streets. It's up to my knee. Blood in the streets, the town of Chicago. She came. Blood on the rise. It's following me. Just about the break of day. Anyway, so from that first bit, the image and repeated phrase "blood in the streets" is perhaps inspired by Pablo Neruda's 1937 poem titled "A Few Things Explained" on an indictment of the Spanish Civil War. It begins with, "And one morning, like the end of the song's first verse, just about the break of day, and ends with a memorable repeated phrase as follows: "Come and see the blood in the streets. Come and see the blood in the streets. Come and see the blood in the streets." Um, this poem has been much quoted, particularly later by Harold Pinter, and accepting his Nobel Prize, where he searingly indicts the US government for its foreign policy. Morrison's song seems to be similarly critical of the USA, connected it with violent imagery, in a time when US was at war with Vietnam. And the image of a peace frog might as well be a sarcastic description of an American soldier dressed in camouflage that screamed like a frog, killing in the name of peace. Interesting notes there. The blood in the streets of Chicago. First, there's a couple of references to that, but one of them is the 1968 Chicago riots following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. Back to the lyrics. She came and then she drove away, sunlight in her hair. She came, blood in the streets, run a river of sadness. She came, blood in the streets, it's up to my thigh. She came, yeah, the river runs red down the legs of the city. Yeah, she came, the women are crying, red rivers are weeping. There's a potential in the notes say that may be a reference to menstruation, like the city bleeding down through the legs. I think that's a bit of a reach, but there you go. She came in town and she drove away, sunlight in her hair, and then as you write, so this lovely sort of interaction and that guitar solo, and then we come back in with this mystical interlude, which screams Val Kilmer in Wayne's World too. Indians scattered on dawn's highway bleeding. Ghosts crowd the young child's fragile eggshell mind. Now, this is really interesting. At 4 years old, Jim Morrison and his family were driving on a New Mexico highway outside Albuquerque. They drove up to an overturned vehicle where people were thrown from the car. A number of Pueblo Indians were injured and dying. Jimmy, as his parents called him, became hysterical and wanted to help. To calm him down, his father explained that it was only a dream. The ghosts represent the Indians. A 4-year-old Morrison has the fragile eggshell mind, and Morrison has said in interviews that this was the most important moment in his life. He is a storyteller, so I don't know how much of that is really true.
Fair, yeah.
That's a story that's told. It's just a fascinating thing that he would put that in. But I think you're right. There's sort of this imagery of the Indians and the young child and everything. It really does relate to USA as a notion and an entity really strongly.
It would be very coincidental if something like literally happened in his life that could easily be an allegory for what has already transpired in the country in which he resides. So I'm a little hesitant to buy into his bullshit, but it's still clever and interesting. Yeah.
It is. Back to lyrics. Blood in the streets in the town of New Haven. Blood stains the roofs and the palm trees of Venice. Blood in my love in the terrible summer. Bloody red sun of fantastic LA. Again here. On December the 9th, 1967, Jim Morrison was making out with a fan backstage in a shower in New Haven right before a show at the New Haven Arena. A cop stumbled upon the two of them getting heavy and told them to leave. I imagine this is in a dressing room or something, so what business a cop was stumbling in, I have no idea. Jim did not leave, so he was maced for his efforts. And after about an hour of recovery time, he went on stage. I think you've seen from the sort of fictional film version of it, this near right at that point anyway. And midway into the first act, which included a big fuck you to the officers that were all in attendance, he was pulled off stage and arrested on charges of inciting a riot, indecency, and public obscenity, charges which were all later dropped. But they suffered loads of stuff with that bullshit. They were banned and all sorts of blacklisted and all sorts of stuff. And so he gives a shout out to New Haven in this song because of that incident. And also, according to his biographer, Jim Carrey, Jim Morrison first started heavily indulging in acid while living around Venice Beach in Los Angeles. He would lay on rooftops and hallucinate, hence the imagery of the colors splashing into the beaches and the rooftops in Venice. That's hilarious. Blood screams her brain. She chops off her fingers. Blood will be born in the birth of the nation. Blood is the rose of mysterious union. Um, Blood will be born in the birth of the nation refers to the D.W. Griffin film from 1915, Birth of the Nation, which romanticizes the early years of the Ku Klux Klan. Obviously, Morrison is referring to the prospect of racial strife, or I think as the Manson fan put it, the race war that was coming. And it's something which has dominated American history since its inception. And the line that you really liked about the blood is the rose of mysterious union. There's a note on it here. See, rose can mean so many things. They're saying using poetic, euphemistic language. This line is referring to defloration and the breaking of the hymen within sort of that. But it's an odd thing to put that in and there. I think it refers to something larger in terms of society or as you say, that sort of culture within America. It's a cracking line.
Yes, it is.
And it finishes off, as you say, rightly with the same one again. There's blood in the streets up to my ankles, blood in the streets up to my knee, blood in the streets of town of Chicago, blood on the rise, it's following me. And just final notes on that. There's a second reference to Chicago. It's the 1968 Democratic National Convention, when the rioters objected to Hubert Humphrey, who was perceived as tone deaf to the Vietnam War. Demonstrators vowed to raise awareness about Humphrey's pro-war position as that he adopted as vice president in Lyndon Johnson's administration. It says here, meanwhile, Chicago Mayor Richard J. Daley imposed a curfew on everyone under 21 years old and vowed zero tolerance to demonstrators. A bloodbath, it says here, ensued between police and rioters that doomed the Democrats in 1968. During his campaign against Nixon, Humphrey later reversed his position in Vietnam, but it was too little too late. So that's interesting to know that. And finally, that final line that says blood will rise, it's following me. It's just a reference that the lyrics and the music were not written together. The Doors as a band had been playing this song for a while as an instrumental, and eventually Jim Morrison wrote the lyrics Peace Frog perfectly and dubbed it over the music.
Nice.
Krieger recalled, I'd written the music, we rehearsed it up and it was really happening, but we didn't have any lyrics and Jim wasn't around, and we just said, fuck it, let's record it, he'll come up with something. And he did.
Yeah.
He took out his poetry book, he found a poem that fit. So actually the lyrics are adopted from a couple of Morrison's poems, one of which was entitled Abortion Stories, which gives the song its bloody imagery, apparently. And that's what the song was known as for a while, until the producer said, perhaps you want to change the title? Which thing, amazingly they did, because it's not the sort of thing they would do.
Sounds like the title for the American South's version of the Brothers Grimm stories. You know, all these evangelicals read their kids from them at night to scare them away.
Yeah. Oh, fucking hell. Messed up. Anyway. Yeah, so I love this song for a number of reasons. I think it's a cracking song anyway, and that whacker guitar, with the wah in it. It's just fantastic.
Yeah.
But again, it refers to something we've said in a few episodes in recent times about this death of the 60s hippie dream, and that sort of optimism, and I like to teach the world to sing and give them all a Coca-Cola, turning into this civil unrest, the anti-Vietnam protests, Manson family, cult murders, Altamont Speedway Festival riots and stabbings, and all of this. The counterculture is calibrating into something much darker and underground than sitting around with daisy chains in your hair and saying free love and shit. And this has got that tone to it as well, the blood in the streets and all this, and it's like this. The summer is over, as it were. We're now into darker times.
This is the proliferation of the Abby Hoffman kind of mentality about the way things are working. This
Which is why
revelation.
I think they're a little sort of like post verse bit, where she came and then she drove away. The sunlight in her hair. That's almost like Hope, or the hippie Hope, is driving away, leaving with the sunlight still in her hair, as it were. This beautiful image. We're left with all the crap.
Well, unfortunately, that
Riots in the
has to
streets.
leave in order for realism to set in and some
Yeah,
honest
yeah,
change to occur. You can't just gloss over it with idealism and
yeah, yeah.
without action. And sometimes when what you're fighting against is so dirty, you got to get on that level. And like I said, it's not pretty, it's hella messy, but for me, that's the hope. Like, yeah, I know what American change looks like after reading about it and learning about it and living some of it. It's not flowers in your hair that get you on the other side. I don't even know if we've been on the other side, but what inches us closer to it is attacking it from a realistic perspective.
Yeah, I mean, fascinating stuff, and it's great. This song conjures up all that, so I thought it
Yes.
was a really, really cool and interesting take, on a Doors song. And yeah, I think sometimes Jim Morrison's not given here the thought he deserved for his lyrics. I think
Yeah,
sometimes gloss over.
I can see that for sure.
Hello, how I love you. Won't you tell me your name? Um, but anyway, I will wrap things up. Thanks, listeners, Andy.
Thank you.
Folks out there, please tell us what you think. If you enjoyed this track, please do hit the like button and drop some comments. Tell us what you think about the Lizard King and this track, this album. It's not my favorite Doors album. It's not my second favorite Doors album, but it's still a corker, definitely. But yeah, love to hear what you guys think. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. Really appreciate everybody who does support the channel. So jump right in. Don't look, just leap. That being said, thanks so much for watching. I'm going to see all of you on the next episode of The Audiophiles.
See you later, guys.